Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Parenting Hour. You're tuned into Unity FM 93.5. And welcome also to our Luton listeners who are tuned in on 105.1, and to Milton Keynes who are also tuned in and listening down there. It's a lovely evening to come to you, talking to you this evening about education and exams, which is on a lot of people's minds at the moment as the SATs is happening and GCSEs has started. I'm sure a lot of parents are interested to hear about exams and how can you prepare your children and what can you do and how can you help them de-stress. So we're going to be dedicating the whole show to that this evening, inshallah. As usual, my name is Kathleen Roche-Nagi and I'm going to be with you for the next hour on Parenting Hour, inshallah. My guest this evening is Ataur Rahman, who is a science teacher, and we're very privileged to have him here in the studio. And he's lots of experience of students who are studying, doing exams at the moment, or maybe stressed, who are maybe leaving their revision till last minute. So he's got a lot of little tips up his sleeve, inshallah, that I'm hoping he will share with us. Inshallah. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Unity FM.
Assalamu alaikum, Kathleen. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, you're welcome. Lovely having you here indeed. Can I just start a little bit about yourself and why did you become a science teacher?
Okay, I fell into science accidentally as a science teacher. I started off in medical physics within the NHS and then progressed on to become a medical physics lecturer at a prestigious medical school. After that, I don't know, there was something that was missing, and then I felt I needed to go into schools and teach science within schools, and that's actually how I fell into science and became a science teacher within schools in the Midlands, actually. So,
and how long have you been doing that?
Teaching, I've been on and off for about 15 years. So I've been teaching quite a long time.
So there's a lot of pupils have gone through your hands.
Yes, they have, yeah.
Lot of experience indeed. And what level do you teach at usually?
Secondary, GCSE and A-level students mostly, but I also do some SVL work, which is specialist visiting lecturer work, and so I do teach at university too.
Oh, very good, very good. Well, now this is exam time. We're here in the midst of exam time. There's been a lot of talk about SATs, and we've had this on the TV the last couple of weeks about SATs and the stress, and should children be sitting exams at that level? And I don't know, maybe before we start talking about the older people doing exams, what is your opinion on that?
The exams are hard. They're hard for the children, but I mean, it's the only way that the government can have an indicator for what the levels children are attaining. But I'm not entirely sure how it actually helps for children to be so stressed. My own 7-year-old's actually going through the SATs period at the moment, and I mean, you know what? We help her as much as we can at home, and the main thing about it is we still try to keep her as a 7-year-old girl who likes to play, who likes to run around and things like that, and try to keep her as stress-free as possible for her. She knows that there are little tests. She comes home with little bits of homework that she needs to do. We go through it with her, we help her out, and as long as she's attaining the marks that she needs to, she's okay. She's quite, mashallah, I've got a daughter that's very conscientious with her work, though, so it's very good in that sense.
Mashallah, which is great. It's a good approach to it, and I think so long as children are like that, enjoying it and not feeling stressed. I was speaking to a teacher at the weekend, and she was saying that she's teaching year 2 children, and she was saying we have a little challenge, and they love challenges, and that's all they call the SATs, is another challenge.
That's it.
That's how she approaches, and they don't get nervous over it.
Yeah, I mean, you don't actually. I don't think you can actually say it's an exam or it's a test to young children, because I don't teach at that level. I mean, I'm just talking about it in terms of as a parent. I can see that sort of stress and frustration on my daughter's face when if she's got 7 out of 10 for, say, a spelling test, but that's because she's probably been told that it's going towards the SATs. Do you see? So, but all in all, I mean, the way I've actually experienced it is that teachers try to assess through the classroom without actually making it out like a test, and children are tested passively, so the assessments are quite passive within the school system. So yeah, I think even though it's not a good idea, it's being dealt with quite well by the people that are working with the children at that age.
Yeah, because we don't want our children now, especially the little ones at that age. Indeed, it's a bit too young for them to be worrying about exams, a bit early for them when they should be enjoying their childhood. It's interesting how you mentioned 7 out of 10 for your child's spelling test, because a lot of parents, and we were actually discussing this during the week in a group we were running, how when a child comes home and gets 7 out of 10, the parents, the first thing they say, and I know it doesn't come to you, but the first thing that other parents say is, why didn't you get 10 out of 10? Instead of building them up and saying, well done, that was great.
Well, 7 out of 10 is a brilliant grade. I mean, if you, from a sort of a secondary school issue now, I mean, if a child scores 70%, which is 7 out of 10, that's an A grade. So, I mean, you should be celebrating it. I think that's what we do. So, in terms of telling a child, you've got 3 marks off a 10, it doesn't matter, because those 3 marks, if you start looking at where those 3 marks came from, I mean, it might have been just a little spelling mistake where they misspelled, they would have misspelled something, but it would have just been a letter that's off. And you could just say, okay, look, we can sort that out, give them a little test again at home, just to make sure, that they're happy within themselves, if they feel a bit dejected because they've got 7 out of 10. But from my point of view, you should celebrate any marks, as long as you shouldn't put children down. That's the way it is. Sure. But that's what because of the system, that's how they feel. Sometimes they feel quite under stress. But children are children, though, and as parents, we have to see our children come first, and their well-being and their happiness come first, really, more than anything else.
I definitely agree. And you are now teaching older children, so you're teaching the GCSE, the A-levels, and I believe GCSE has started?
Yes, they have stress. Yes, I mean, that's stressful from a teacher's point of view, really, I mean, more than anything else. GCSEs are... It's going to be over in about 3 or 4 weeks.
3 or 4 weeks. Oh, it's a long time indeed. So, science at GCSE level, how many exams is there?
It does depend on what the child's ability is. If they're doing sort of triple award science, then there's 9 exams in total. If they're doing additional science, I mean, it depends on the exam board too. If they're doing additional science, then they've got 6 exams. It depends on the syllabus too. There's quite a lot. So I mean, in science, the maximum is 9 exams. On top of that, they had coursework that they had to complete too. So there's quite a bit with that. There's
quite a bit indeed that they have to learn and study.
Definitely.
And what advice do you give children about their studying? Is it too late now? Already the exam has started. GCSE's on. Should they know it all by now and just go home in the night time and relax, put up their feet, or should they be cramming up and staying up late all hours of the night? Or is there a happy medium?
There's definitely a happy medium. I mean, if most of my students, I mean, the ones that I've taught, I've made sure that they've had some revision packs. They've been actively involved in revision, even if it's till the last minute. There is, what I would say is just go over an exam paper, but use your own revision guides or notes to actually answer their questions. And see if that rejigs the memory, really, and then, just work on that. But definitely have an early night. If you have any revision notes, make sure you've gone through those beforehand and just relax. Don't stress and don't cram anything in, because most likely, from experience, students have stressed out, they've gone into the exam and then they've just gone totally blank. Exams aren't there to... Well, they're there to assess your knowledge, but they're not there to fool you into anything, or, they don't have trick questions or anything like that. So read the questions carefully. And if worst comes to worst, try and sort of... take the answers from the questions themselves, and some students have actually become quite good at doing that. And most of those exam questions would be that, really. Just if you're stuck, read the question properly, and you should be able to answer something from that in terms of getting a couple of marks out of. Say if it's a 5-mark question, you should be able to score at least 2 from just reading the question properly.
Right, so that's a simple technique, tip
definitely,
really
definitely.
for parents. And I know children don't often read the question properly and probably fall down there. So that's the first tip that you think children should have.
Take time, read the questions, yes, and if it's an essay question or a 6-mark question, plan the question to the simple mind map or a spider diagram, just in case you've run out of time. At least the examiner would know that you've tried something there, and they'll be looking at the keywords to mark anyway. So, yeah.
So, is it useful to look at how many marks question it is to know how to answer that question?
Definitely, yeah. Definitely. I mean, if it's a 2-marker, you know that it's going to need a sentence with at least 2 points on there. If it's a 1-marker, then you just need to convey 1 point across. 4 marks would be a little bit more constructed in terms of having a couple of statements. It does depend on the type of questions though too, and the 6-marker would be a long answer question with at least 6 points in there, and if you can, go to a conclusion with your points too. So yeah, I mean, it does depend on the type of question. What I do is also look through Bloom's taxonomy with the children. Some of the children that I've taught, the higher level ones, we look at how the question's structured, and in terms of the verbs used, describe, explain and things like that, and then we sort of gear the questions around the answers around those particular keywords. And that's something that the parents can actually look at too if they wanted to, or even students if they have a little bit of time just to look at the Bloom's taxonomy of exam questions. And,
I don't know that. Is that an online or is that a book?
No. I mean, you can just Google it. You just say Bloom's taxonomy of exam questions, and what it does is it just breaks down. It shows you what levels these verbs are used at. Really, it depends on. And if they look at the exam paper, it shows how to break those questions down. That is my 100% exam tip. If you had like a month or so to revise for the exams, just to look at how the exam questions are actually structured, and you could maximise the amount of marks you can get. There's difference between 2 grades, even if you could just
by just reading the question, understanding the verbs,
understanding how the question is structured. That's
and to teachers teach that in school. Is this part of a normal science class lesson to teach children how to answer those questions? So because they need to know the facts. Yes, are they busy teaching the facts, or do they also teach the exam techniques?
I've incorporated exam techniques into my lessons. Okay. I've incorporated revision sessions, but yeah, it does depend on the actual timescale the teachers have available to actually teach, and then they've got other constraints in other schools. Maybe I can't actually say anything about the schools, but there is a time constraint, and furthermore there's coursework, and just looking at how probably organised the actual teaching staff is within those schools. There is but exam technique is paramount really, and I incorporate it into my lessons anyway. I mean, as an assessment tool throughout lessons from day one. So they've always. It's something that's been in the national framework of teaching anyway. That you need to, and all teachers would have been trained to have some kind of assessment for learning in their lessons. So they need to make sure that the students have learned what they taught within that lesson to a certain extent. So I incorporate exam questions, and we talk about the exam and deliberate what the exam question is actually asking, and then try and see what the students can answer from that.
That's good techniques. I'm just wondering, do all teachers really break down the subject like that to be able to include that process to get the child thinking so broadly like that? Being stressed under time, as you said, the assessments, having to do all these
it's essential.
projects.
I think it's essential that the students are able to. I mean, because literacy isn't that great at the moment, and it's being put into in every single subject that literacy has to be a massive part of it. I mean, if you look at the exam papers, you get marked on spelling, punctuation, and grammar.
In science also.
In science also, yeah. So it's one of those things. It's there, and knowing what words mean and definitions would be a really good thing for the students to have. Yeah, I mean, it does depend on the teachers, though, and teaching staff and schools, again, like I said. I can't comment on that.
And sometimes pupils like a particular teacher, and because they like it, they do really well in that subject, and then other students, because they don't like a teacher, they don't do really well in that subject. So that's again, I suppose, that's part of how they succeed and how they get on with
I mean, that is the case in some scenarios, I mean, I tend to be one of those sort of hard teachers, so
you don't come across to me as a hard teacher. You're smiling away here.
No, I am, but I mean, main complaint that I give too much work, which is I think, it's a positive rather than negative, but I try to get my students to do the best that they can, so that's what I need them to do, and that's, again, it's a personal thing for me to be able to instill that in children at a young age, because I've worked at universities. I've seen the level of graduates or undergraduates coming in, and their research methodology isn't that great, so I try to put that into the school system too, and make sure that the students are able to ask those type of questions, or be able to develop that inside themselves. And I think that's where my background goes into why I became a proper science teacher rather than just
Yes, you've experienced both, so you know how to nurture from a young age to help them into university. And something parents might not have realised, that in science that their grammar, their spelling is being checked. I had a son who had a huge problem with his writing. I couldn't hardly read it. I pitied any examiner, and I often wondered, did he lose marks because of that?
It could have, but I mean, if it's illegible. But then there's a stringent system in place from the exam boards anyway. There's a group of examiners that would actually mark their questions. I'm not entirely sure about the system and how it works, because of once the exams are done, we just send them off. But there are several markers, and I'm sure that they refer on to somebody else who will try and read it. So there is a system in place.
Well, he's done okay. So they
right,
must have been able to read it indeed. But it is a worry always for parents, the little things like that. And of course, you can't do much about that the night before an exam, except reminding them to write a bit bigger or whatever that they're. But if they are stressed, they probably will go back to their normal routine. Whereas if it was months earlier, you could prepare and get them trained in it.
The main thing is, people do go back to their sort of innate way of doing things, don't they? So they'll probably, But the main thing is just to try and keep as level-headed as possible in the exam. Try and stay as relaxed as you can, and read the question as well as possible, really, and underline keywords in the question, deliberate them. I mean, with the science paper, say if you got an hour to do them, we broke it down to say 7 minutes per question.
Okay.
So 7 minutes per question. In that 7 minutes, that's what I've been trying to train my students with again. 5 minutes to do each question, and then you've got 2 minutes left, which gives you time at the end to come back again and look over any corrections that you might have. So I mean, that's the way we've sort of pushed it. Well, I've been pushing. I don't know if anyone else has, but that's the way I've been.
That's the way you train your students to answer. So
because I mean, it's one of those things. It's if they can do it fast, and if they can answer correctly as fast as possible, it's even better. So because it gives them time to go back over their work and then make sure that they've got everything correct. So that's the way I've been sort of over the last couple of weeks, just been training the students, really. And
when when they open this question paper, do you give them any indication of to start with the number one and work through it, or should they read it all first, or should they go for the easiest ones first?
That's personal style and choice. What I tend to do is tell the students to read through the questions, give themselves a little bit of time to read through all of the questions, or just glance over the questions. Then it's up to them if they want to do the easiest ones first and more difficult ones later. I have no preference into should they go sort of systematically through questions or anything like that. I just tell them, make sure you've read through the exam paper beforehand, so you don't actually scare yourself when you turn a page and you're like, I can't do this question or something like that. Just make sure you've read, So,
and read it right up to the end. Again, another something my son did last year in his A-levels. He was just about handing in his paper when we realised there was a question on the back that he hadn't seen.
Yeah,
It's a bit too late then, of course.
I mean, it's one of those things. Just you just be wary, and I think just to make them so conscious of that they just look at the exam paper. And one thing I personally recommend, even at this last minute, is students, if they haven't started looking at past exam papers, look at them, get yourself ready for the type of questions, prepare yourself for the type of questions you're going to face, so you're not scared of them when you actually enter the exam, thinking one of them are going to be sitting. You actually know what type of questions, and what it is, I mean, the questions do sort of roundabout repeat themselves in a certain way. I mean, there isn't any way of predicting, but I mean, they do sort of start repeating, and so you can actually start looking at some trends and things like that if you wanted to.
So do they come up every now and again, or every kind of the same questions?
There's very similar questions. They can only test you on what the specification states. So you can sort of, if you've got sort of experience of answering those style of questions, then it's even better.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm saying, is just to have expose yourself to as many exam papers as possible. I mean, there's still some science exams that are going on next week, and after the holidays too, so after the half-term holidays. So if someone's starting, say, late, just get hold of the past exam papers online. I mean, you can just go into any website, exam website, and just get the exam papers, mark schemes, and see what the questions are and how they're answered, and actually just deliberate that way and make sure you can actually do them. And last minute sort of revision pointers too, I've mentioned this before, is that students can get an exam paper and use their revise guides to help them answer those questions too, if they haven't done any revision yet. That's
and do students sometimes leave it till like this, don't do any revision?
I've had experience of students doing that in the past. Yes, I've had that. I mean, they've panicked, and they've panicked in the exam too. But there's very little you can do apart from reassure them that it's the exam can be reset next year or the year after, and you can actually just set the exam as it is, because it's one of those things. We were at school when we were younger. I mean, it was drilled into us, fail to prepare and prepare to fail, and so it's always been that sort of thing that's been instilled in us. So I've always tried to instill that into my students too. So. Yeah,
preparation, indeed. Yes, it's a really good motto to have, to help students in preparing, not leaving things till last minute.
Definitely.
But then it depends probably on the age of the child, the development of the child. Some children are very different. Boys are different to girls. Again, science subjects are different, maybe to literacy. To topics
definitely.
Different.
I mean, it's about when you come into that realization, really, that you're academic or non-academic, and we can't sort of tarnish all children with the same brush. And that's even if you're going back to key stage 1 tests and things like that. Even at the moment, I mean, you can't really. All children are different, and all children have a different level and different time when they actually start to study. When they realise that I need to do something, these qualifications do matter. And some might not be that academic in school, but later on in life you see that they've become investment bankers or something like that, and you think what happened. But they realise that they needed to do something, and they've gone back into education. That's
so true, and actually we have some experience of that too in our family, where one child did nothing up to about 4 months before GCSE, and then something clicked, and then wow, it was totally different after that. Is there a way we could have done something differently to nurture that beforehand?
Not really. I mean, it's very difficult because you can't throw as many resources at a child as you can want to. I mean, it's just when that realization happens for themselves. When it happens for themselves, those children actually do a lot better than the ones that have been nurtured into it. So the ones that are actually ones that
I must say that he came out with straight A's and everything, but it was just he left it so late, and then it was. I can't believe that children. It's like a flick of a switch that something flicked in him that he wanted to do it for himself.
Yeah, and once that happens, the momentum starts,
and
then they keep on going and keep on going until they can get the best they can. And that's, I think, once you see that light switch on in pupils at school, it's amazing. That feeling is amazing, because you know that you tried and you know that child is capable, but they're not pushing themselves, but you can't do anything to help them any more than what you're doing. And then one day they'll come in and everything's changed, and it's amazing to have that.
How many pupils roughly, before we go to commercial break, does that happen to on average, or is it more common to boys than girls? Do you know how, in your experience?
Boys, it happens later. Girls, it happens earlier. Girls around about year 11, and it's more common to have girls sort of having that realization earlier. Boys, they test the water. They don't do that well in their GCSEs, but when it comes to their A levels, that's when they start to work.
Okay. Okay. So parents, the message is there. Never give up.
Just persevere.
Let them do their best, encourage them. There is a time for us all to do well, and inshallah they help them with their study, give them time for revision, make sure they get good sleep, make sure they're eating well, getting some fresh air and more relaxed going in, so that they can concentrate on the exam questions and to read the question properly. We're going to come back after the commercial break, where I'm going to ask you about a few cases that you, in your experience, how the children have moved from not studying right up and to getting very good results. So maybe we can pick up some themes, and parents can pick up some themes when they're listening to the programme, inshallah. Jazakallah khairan. For our listeners, do come back and tune in to us after this break. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back to Unity FM 93.5. You're tuned in to Parenting Hour, and you've got your host with you, Kathleen Roche-Nagi, along with our guest today, Ataur, Rahman, who is our science teacher and very experienced science teacher. He's done a lot of work in different areas, from being a teacher to a tutor to he was telling me lots of things over the break with Ukraine University, so a lot of experience behind him, mashallah, in getting pupils through and getting those exam results. As you heard before the break, now is the time for parents to encourage their children, get them to read the question properly, getting them to have a good night's sleep, have some fresh air, because the exam season is already here now, and often the children do know the answer, but may get confused because they haven't read the question properly. You were saying it before the break that if the pupil can read it properly, they can actually decipher some of the answer from that question.
Definitely, yes. I mean, you can. In terms of, I can only speak about it again from science point of view. The questions do have a certain element of the answer within the question. So if they can actually read the question, they will be able to get at least 1 mark just rejigging the wording, and that's the total last minute cheating way of just getting a mark. I wouldn't recommend it for all students, but there is a way of just being able to read the question and be able to get an answer, deciphering an answer.
And I'm sure that would emotionally calm them down. I know when I was doing exams good while ago now, but sometimes I remember opening the paper when I was young like this, doing equivalent to GCSE and A levels in Ireland, and I'd open the paper and I'd look at it and I'd think, I don't know anything. But once I read it and, like you say, pull out some questions and start answering those questions, then the rest would come to me, and actually definitely. I did know it.
Yes, definitely. Well, what they could do is, in that sort of situation, underline the keywords that they think there's keywords, basically, and just go from that and try and just answer with those keywords in mind. Make sure that they know, if it's a 1 mark question, not to write reams, and that's what some students do, because the first response is the one that's actually marked in an exam situation. So don't list out too many things, and don't go overboard with the 1 mark question. Try to see if you could save that for the later ones. that's
good tips there, good advice. We mentioned there before the break that maybe if we talk about some cases that you've had, some pupils that have gone through your wide variety of experience, that parents might be able to pick up some tips, some ideas of how those students have gone through, and maybe even see some strains or some of their own children's thought process through some examples. Yeah. So can you just mention a couple of pupils that you started off with that were very relaxed, laid back, didn't care about anything, and then over the time started to kick in and started thinking, yes, we want to study, we want to get on in our lives, or students that really liked maybe the physics side of the science rather than the biology side of science, and that helped them to get a good mark.
Yeah, I mean, there's far too many cases like that. I mean, like you said before, everyone's an individual. All children are individuals, so all parents should regard the children as individuals. They don't fit a mould, for the first thing. Yeah, there have been cases. There's one lad that I can think, if I can think back a little bit. He was quite dejected. He didn't like school all that much. There was a low degree of absenteeism from his side too, but he didn't particularly enjoy being in school. And one of the reasons why was he said that the work was too difficult. He was dejected, and it was just highlighted that he needed one-to-one in one of his reviews with his form tutor, that he needed one-to-one support, and so he was taken out of the classroom and given that one-to-one support within certain subjects. I mean, one of them was science, really, that he needed help with, and he improved. He improved greatly. His grades started changing because what it was is he's able to understand a little bit more about the questions or about what was needed from him. And I think, like I said before, all parents have children who are all individuals. Yeah. So if they notice that about their children too, I mean, they can actually just take them to one side, maybe at home, and just help them out with that. So just maybe listen to them read those questions out to them and see if they can deliberate the questions themselves and see if they can break them down and help the children that way, which will be a good thing. But this lad, I mean, he had that support, and he went on to do A-levels, and he went and actually became a physiotherapist, which you needed, quite high A-level grades.
Yes, you do.
So he's done really well.
He did really well, and it could be, there's lots of different reasons, I'm sure, why children need that little bit of one-to-one support, but what came to my mind there when you're saying that was English language. Maybe English not their first language. Definitely. And mightn't have understood the question, might have known the answer, but just didn't know what the question was meaning and needed to go read that question, some help and some more extra support in reading it syllable by syllable to understand the question. Definitely.
Just to be, I think, from a parenting point of view, I mean, it's just to be supportive, really, rather than anything else. From a teacher's point of view, we'll try our best to make sure that the pupils have the information and the knowledge that they need for the exams. But from a parent's point of view, I think, there's a certain element of just trying to help the child at home to realise that, they are individuals, they are human, and they're not there just to make the grades. Sometimes they might not be able to, but then just give them that time and see what happens in the future. Really, I think just to relax a little sometimes to help out.
Actually, parents often say to me that they don't know how to help their children to get a revision timetable. That their children leave things till too late and then try and cramp things in, and then the morning of the exam or the couple of days before they say, we haven't done our revision yet, we haven't finished our revision yet. Is there a way of preparing children at home? I know the school is doing it and that they've revised in the school, but is there a way now of helping children at home, especially we have half term coming up in a couple of weeks' time. Should the parents be getting their children to study that whole half term? What would you recommend in your experience?
I would have recommended a revision timetable in place for about a month ago, at least. I mean, with the 4 weeks worth of revision for the exams, then the children could possibly do really, really well. Over the half term, definitely, but let them have a little bit of break over the half term to, incorporate a revision timetable, but let them have that little bit of time out also from studying, because you don't really want them to peak too early maybe, or you don't want them to overstudy, and when it comes to the exams they're tired and they're not able to perform as well as they should. So yeah, revision timetable should be something that's ongoing. If a parent wants to develop one at home with a child, then they should actually talk to the child and focus on the subjects that the child is finding difficult. So if the child is finding a subject particularly difficult, they should put that in maybe earlier on in the evening for their revision, where things would be taken in a little bit more than a subject where the child might be finding easier. That could possibly be sort of factored in later on in the evening, where in the revision plan, basically. It's something that has to be tailor-made for the pupil.
So that we've been talking about a lot about trying to prepare children and get them through, and we parents can do a certain amount, teachers can do a certain amount, pupils can do a certain amount. So it's everybody kind of working together to achieve that outcome at the end. Have you got a case of people that you thought, they will never succeed, they will never go through things, and then they really surprised you that they did, that they worked hard, they turned over, and they succeeded?
In an idealistic world, I wouldn't say I've ever held that belief about pupil. I've always tried to push all the pupils, but there have been cases where it's been the proverbial, you can take a donkey to water but you can't make it drink sort of thing, and you've tried the hardest you could to get these students through, but then there's some other elements, maybe peers or something like that would have influenced some people outside of school, and you can't actually get them through the exams, and they wouldn't want to. They made it into a strategy that they're coping with it wrong. But I mean, I'm thinking back now, about 5-6 years ago, there was a lad that was that exact sort of same sort of situation, and he's actually now at university. He's done some access courses. He's gone back into and he's doing pharmacology at university now. I mean, those are major things. I mean, that lad, when I saw him, I didn't personally. I remember what he was like. He wasn't he was quite your normal sort of good lad. Okay, I mean, he didn't really want to work. I don't know. It might be wrong to say, but he wasn't a high flyer. And in my books, I mean, to have him get to that, I think when I saw him, we were doing this sort of like a celebratory dance when I saw him just recently, and just going, he's doing pharmacology, just
wow, and it just shows how people develop at different stages, and
definitely.
Alhamdulillah, we're living in a country that is possible. You don't have to do everything when you're a teenager. You can do it later on. And you mentioned there about teenagers and peer pressure. That on some pupils is huge.
Definitely.
Peer pressure, being pulled into things, being influenced by their peers, not being cool to study. It's not a cool thing to do, so they kind of follow the trend. Definitely.
And it's one of those things. It's peer pressure is always going to be there, unfortunately, and it just depends on the groups the pupils hang out with and keep. Really, I mean, there are luckily, I mean, not all peer groups are like that. I mean, there are pupils in certain groups within school that I've noticed too that, there's one person that's very intelligent and every single member of that group so eggs that person on and saying, you're going to have to be the person in the group that does really well. You're going to be, that star of our group and stuff like that. So that's quite nice too. And, you just hope that all of those pupils would have seen that one individual as a source of inspiration and maybe push themselves too with that rather than just trying to hold one person up, really. But that's been the case too.
And of course, there's a lot going on for teenagers with brain development as well. It's not just the hormones and everything that's happening in that age and trying to one day feel an adult, next day they might feel a child, but also that their brain is still only developing. So it's hard on them. They need a lot of sleep.
Definitely. But the thing is doing these exams at this early on and, having that pressure of these exam grades actually dictate something for later on in their lives. I think that's a lot of pressure for children at the moment. I mean, teenagers are still children. They're not, active adults. Yeah. But, that is a lot of pressure. Doing GCSEs and, I'm almost 40 years old and my GCSE grades are still looked at in an application form for a job. And so it's one of those things, aren't they, really? So the pressure's on them and they feel it but one thing that we need to say to children is that it doesn't matter about those particular GCSE grades that you've sat this year. If you haven't done that well, then you can actually resit and make sure that you've done a little bit better the following year. I mean, I know students that want to go to university, and one of the things about the university entry requirements now is that you need a B grade in English and maths. And those individuals that have had sort of a C grade are resitting those GCSEs in maths and English now, just so that they can get a B grade. So these are some of the courses at university now, and that's the way it's being pushed up because it's a competition at the end of the day, isn't it? Yeah.
It's very competitive indeed, a very competitive life. I don't know if you've heard of the school down south that's trialling out different times of the day for pupils to start school. So because teenagers need more sleep, they're actually starting at around noontime and continuing later on. What do you think of that idea? Because you've worked a lot with teenagers now.
I think you just give them a chance to wake up. Yeah, definitely. I mean, I was always, again, from my point of view, I think I was brought up with, an early bird always catches the worm and that sort of, all these kind of little proverbs things. But yeah, if you give the child to sort of wake up and come into school, I think it'd be better actually. I mean, it'd be nice to actually, from a teacher's point of view, to have a lie into a little bit. But yeah, give them a chance. And maybe having a later finish. I'd like to see what the results are actually, to see if I can actually give a confirmed verdict on it, but I'd like to see what the results are. I mean, in Europe they do quite a lot of different types of hours too. I mean, some Spanish schools have heard that they have siestas, so they don't have that time in school, and during when the noonday sun's up and things like that. So it'll be nice to actually see
what the results are, because a lot of young people, of course, have a temptation of staying up late, often on things that they shouldn't be on, whether it's iPhones or iPads or watching films or these things that the chill is a common thing that parents say, that teenagers want to chill out before they go to sleep at the night time, and then they stay up a bit too long extra. I mean, that's probably more of a parenting problem, that parents are not consistent in putting boundaries in place for children to get a sufficient sleep, especially at exam time.
Yeah, I mean, well, chilling isn't playing computer games and things like that, because that's keeping your mind active quite a bit. I think, there should be some kind of restraint in that. Parents should probably enforce some kind of authority saying that, don't play computer games till the early hours. If you got an exam the day before, you know, just chill with other things, revise. Yeah. There's quite a lot of different things. And I keep on saying this: everyone's an individual, and you know, we have to take it as that. Everyone's an individual, and you know, a lot of people. So like, I mean, now, you know, from my experience, pupils say that they concentrate better with music, but they're not going to have music in an exam.
Yes,
Again, as long as it's not a distraction, then it works. Some pupils say that they work better in groups. That's okay too. But in an exam, you're just sitting it by yourself. So you know, don't make it the norm. And as long as it's not a distraction, the group isn't a distraction, and you get your studying, then that's fine. There's lots of different things.
Would understanding their learning styles help? Because I did hear of students where teachers actually have told them to mind map. You were talking about mind mapping earlier on, and I've told them to mind map at home, and then brought them in and sit down in the exam hall and said, now visualize your mind map on that wall over there. So that when the question came up, that they actually could see their mind map of the answers of the questions.
That's interesting. Yeah, I mean, it can work. There's different types of learners. I mean, you know, I'm not entirely sure to what degree you know about those. There's the visual learners, which are the mind mappers. Yeah. Then you've got the kinesthetic learners who like to sort of act out the things. Then you've got your auditory learners who like to listen to, who learn better when, you know, listening to things rather than I don't know, some people do learn better in a classroom because they're listening to what the teacher's saying, so they can remember that. And then you've got your tactile learners who like to make things and touch things and be able to, you know, do it that way. So there's lots of different styles of learning. I mean, if you can incorporate that into you know, teaching, then that would be a good idea too. At home, if you know, I get students as for homework to make models of things, make mind maps and things. I mean, there's lots of different things. One example I'll give you, I mean, it's quite funny that you said about being able to visualize the mind map. My older brother helped me in my GCSE exams, and I remember him going through some formulas with me, and you remember him going through it. And when I was sitting in the exam, I could remember hearing his voice in the exam.
Yes, so you could imagine. Yeah.
So I mean, you know, it's just saying, it does work.
I think parents maybe need to understand that there and get to know their children's learning style. So that's one tip we can give parents. If you had another 2 or 3 tips to add on to that, what would you give them quickly in the last minute of the show? Okay,
I've mentioned quite a few tips already. I mean, but the main thing is relax before the exam. Make sure that you're going in fully rested, so sleep well the night before. Go through any revision notes that you've made as a last minute check, and drink plenty of water, keep yourself hydrated. And my main tip is don't panic when you see those questions, because, you know, like I said before, examiners aren't there to trick you into answers or anything like that. Just read the question properly and you should be able to, should be okay. And, you know, all the best basically with exams. Yes,
well, we wish all our listeners and all our listeners' children who are doing exams at the moment the very best. Inshallah, they will get those results that they deserve. Inshallah, they will do very, very well and succeed in life. And as you mentioned earlier on, you know, if things don't go so well, alhamdulillah, we're living in a country that they can repeat it again next year. They can do better. There's lots of opportunities there.
Definitely.
Inshallah. Jazakallah khairan for coming on and explaining to us so much about study and different types of study and how to prepare for exams. And we wish all the students very well, inshallah. We'd love to see you again in the future, inshallah. Maybe we're talking about other exams, and we'd love to have you back again, inshallah.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome, inshallah. Okay. Until next week, listeners, have a good week, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.
You told me I can never be anything, yeah. But I'll show you there's nothing that I cannot be if I put my trust in you. I'm gonna find my own voice, yeah. I'm gonna make my own way. Here's the only reason I'm gonna find a better day, yeah, yeah, yeah. In between all the noises, underneath all the pain, here's the only reason I'm gonna find a better day. With no return inside, a hollow scream in the middle of the night. So won't you please let go of me inside? I need to spread my soul and fly. Gonna find my own voice, yeah. I'm gonna make my own way. Here's the only reason I'm gonna find a better day, yeah, yeah, yeah. In between all the noises, underneath all the pain, here's the only reason I'm gonna find a better day, yeah, yeah, yeah. Gonna try right now, find the strength somehow. It ain't easy for me, oh, you broke me down. But I don't hate you at all, there's still love in my heart. Oh, the reason we fall is to rise. Gonna find my own voice, yeah. I'm gonna make my own way. Here's the only reason I'm gonna find a better day, yeah, yeah, yeah. In between all the noises, underneath all the pain, here's the only reason I'm gonna find